Welcome to Coffee and One Thing with Team Beery, a show about real estate, home ownership, and what is happening in the housing market in the beautiful Valley of the Sun. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and let's talk about coffee and one thing.
Okay, welcome back. This is episode number 46. We are Team Beery, and this is Coffee and One Thing, and we are super excited to have you guys with us. We have a wonderful guest, Tyler with SunRun, and he is going to walk us through some of the information that we need to know about solar. But before we get into that, we have coffee, and it's called Caribou Coffee. It's from Colorado. It's actually really good. I was in Colorado the other day, or other couple weeks ago, and I remembered about it. So I was like, let's do that. That'll be fun.
And she didn't bring me any.
And I didn't bring any for you. Sorry,
This
dude.
is the second time.
That's the coffee that they have in Einstein's. Is that right?
Yeah,
there we
Einstein. So they have some good stuff. So if you guys are interested in checking it out,
Do you
we
bring
highly
empty
recommend it.
12-pack containers to parties too?
Never.
Okay.
Never, not once.
All right. That'd be party foul.
Yeah, that would be a party foul. All right, so we have so many questions. We hear this all the time. What's going on with solar? So let's hear what you're about. Who are you? What's going on? Tell us about your company.
Yeah.
Let's hear some stuff.
How did you get into solar?
How did you get
Absolutely.
into this?
So, actually, kind of by accident. I actually was a journeyman electrician originally, and got an opportunity as a foreman on an installation crew for a solar company that's actually not around anymore. Loved it. Worked there for a couple years. Backbreaking work, brutal, especially in Arizona with the heat, and on top of those concrete tiles, it's just like working on a griddle. But I loved the industry. I loved the work. I loved what I was doing. I saw the writing on the wall with the company itself, though. They were having some financial issues, and I decided I needed to find something new. And I was kind of thinking to myself, if I'm going to be in this industry, I need to be with a company that I could potentially retire with, which means the company has to be around when I retire. Then the issue with my industry is there's just so many fly-by-night companies. The average solar company in Arizona has a 3 to 5 year lifespan, with the exception of one, which would be SunRun. So that's why I got into SunRun. And the other factor was that I was just over breaking my back and sweating it out every single day. So
Right.
that's why I moved into the sales position.
There you go. And the sales position is pretty hard mentally, though, because you've got a
Yes.
lot of things you've got to work through.
Oh, yeah. One good thing was that I already had a passion for what I was doing. It was just learning a completely new skill set, almost starting from scratch. But it was uplifting at the same time. I would go to a networking meeting, or I would just go around and meet people, and I would be driving home, and I'd be driving past a construction site, and it was 115 degrees outside. I was like, I do this for a living. I just talk to people all day long. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you don't need a license to put solar on your
Well, no,
house, right?
you do, but it's fairly easy to attain your license. So what ends up happening a lot is a general contractor. My general contractor might have been around, Joe Schmo contracting for 10 years, and he sees that there's a lot of money in the industry, so he decides to, he could go out and get a plumbing license, he can go out and get an electrical license. Might as well go out and get a solar license and see how much money is there in that industry. And a lot of times they'll make money for a few years. We call the industry the solar coaster. Just a lot of ups and downs. So what ends up happening is you hit one of these downs and you can't adapt, and it's very much adapter or die industry. So
Because the technology is changing all the time?
many factors, anything from the federal tax incentives being lowered or going away, changes in the industry as far as tariffs on imported solar panels, the utility companies constantly changing the demographic for how we sell power back. There's so many factors
Right.
that go into it, and if you don't learn how to adapt, then
Right.
then you're left in the dust.
So the
unfortunately.
rules kind of change a little bit.
All the time.
Okay.
Constantly. Yeah. So constantly keeping up on the industry, constantly reading articles, seeing what's on the forefront for technology. And if you're not informed and you're not prepared, then you end up failing. And then what ends up happening is Joe Schmo Solar will go out of business. Joe Schmo Contracting might be just fine, but they're not going to have anything to do with any of their customers that went solar with them. So we get, I think, upwards of 8 to 10 calls to our warehouse in Phoenix a week of people saying, hey, I got a solar system on my roof. Company went out of business, and it's not working. Can you come in and take a look at it and see about fixing it? And we have to tell them no. As soon as we touch that system, we're liable for the entire thing.
Oh, wow.
And we don't want to put ourselves on the line.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
For somebody else's work.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So I can tell there's a huge passion for this. I could just see this. So this is pretty cool. I'm excited. Let's get into some questions for you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I hear that there are some federal incentives.
Yes.
And there's also state incentives. So
Correct,
let's kind of walk
correct.
through that piece because that kind of becomes a big financial.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to go solar back in 2019 when the federal tax credit was 30%. I had a buddy who signed up with a huge system. He ended up getting $18,000 back in a federal tax credit. He barely made it in time because in 2020, the federal tax credit was lowered to 26%. 4% doesn't seem like a lot, but for him, it was about almost $4,000.
Wow.
So, nothing to sneeze at. The Biden administration extended that because it was originally supposed to be that the federal tax credit went from 26% in 2020 to 22% in 2021, and then in 2022 it was going to be gone. So the Biden administration actually extended that by a couple of years. So now, up to 2022, we still have that 26% federal tax credit. Next year it'll be 22%. Then 2024 it'll finally be gone.
Okay.
Wow. So if we're going to do it, we need to do it soon.
Yeah, and it's not even the idea of I need to put ink to paper on December 31st. Technically, depending on which tax advisor you talk to, which CPA you talk to, which I'm definitely not a tax advisor, don't claim to be, but depending on who you talk to, most people say that the system has to be installed. It doesn't have to be operational, but it has to be installed in 2022 if you want to claim it on your 2022 taxes.
Gotcha.
Well, we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 months from signing a contract to installation, depending on if we
Wow.
need to talk about re-roofing, upgrading your main electrical panel, lots of different
Right.
factors that
Wow.
come in. So around July, I'm going to start having to tell my customers, there's no guarantee that I can get your
Make
system
this
turned on by
happen.
2022.
Wow.
It's kind of something you have to prepare for.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's really good to know. That's
Yeah.
really good to know. And so then there's also state incentives.
Correct. Yeah, those don't look like those have been steady since I've been in the industry for 8 years now. And that's a flat $1,000 for everyone that goes solar.
Okay.
So
And that's
ahead.
once a year or just a
No,
one
that's just the
time?
year that you go solar.
Okay,
Now you
gotcha.
can stretch that. So I have a lot of retirees or people who don't have a lot of tax liability because they own their own business or something to that effect. And for those people, you can push the federal tax credit for 2 years. So let's say that you have an $8,000 tax credit, federal tax credit, and you only have $4,000 in tax liability in 2022. Well, you can take $4,000 in 2022 and take
Stretch it
another
out.
$4,000 in 2023.
Nice.
carry it over.
Correct. And then the
Yeah.
state tax credit actually can stretch for 5 years. Most people don't use it for the full 5 years, but
Okay.
you have the ability anyway.
Pretty cool.
So that leads me to a question that's not on here. Can I interject?
Yeah.
So do you see, with that incentive going away, do you see people backing away from it, or do you think it's still going to be something people want to do
I think
regardless
it's-
of the incentives?
I think it's going to be all more the same for the solar coaster. I mean, we're
Okay.
used to it. We'll see fly-by-night companies fail.
Right.
We'll see someone with some new idea try and jump in, and maybe they can hang on for a few years. Maybe they're successful.
Right.
I think we'll be fine. If you look at our stock, SunRun stock, we've been pretty steady
Right.
since 2008 when the name SunRun came into being.
Okay.
So I have no
You're
worry
feeling
about
like
us.
it's something that works either way, whether there's an
Yeah.
incentive or not.
We'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Whether
well,
it's
they could possibly they can redo incentives later, right? Just as they take it away.
the
government.
federal government, yeah. I mean, just Biden did the same thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's possible. We can cross our fingers. We have to prepare though. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in my company. I always said, my company makes really, really fantastic decisions, they take forever to make those decisions. So, but luckily in this scenario, the writing
Fantastic
corporate.
decisions sometimes take a while.
Definitely,
You got to
definitely.
think through everything.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So let's talk about, I want to get off the grid.
Right.
How do I get on the grid or how do I get off the grid? What's the story on that?
Common thing that I hear people say, I hate the utility company. I don't trust them. I want to be as independent as possible. I think the world's going to end, whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, if your home and your property is in city limits, then you have to be connected to the grid. Legally, you can't untie completely. We can get you as independent as possible. We can get you panels. We can get you battery backup. You're prepared in the case of an outage for long-term periods of time. But the only way to be off-grid is if you have a property in the middle of nowhere where the utility company doesn't even service you anyway.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if electricity goes out to like way west, you're still on the grid. It's where electricity doesn't go to.
When you say way west, you're talking about Buckeye or
like
something like that?
Tonopah.
Yeah, so Tonopah, outside of our jurisdiction, so I'm not too
Okay.
familiar with how the utility works out there. But if they were to go solar out there, if they already have a property that's attached to the grid, then they're stuck with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I meant.
That answers that. Yeah.
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 Okay.
So mostly what I'm referring to is, you get someone with property, 40 miles east of Sierra, what's the place called? Sierra Vista.
You're right.
Someone out there in the middle of nowhere that just had,
There's
they're
no-
hoping they
And it's
can get it well.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, gotcha. Okay, so if you want to be off the grid, you really just have to start from scratch.
Definitely. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So even if there's a power line a mile away from you on a road, but there's nothing to your property, you're fine. It's once you connect to the power line.
Well,
If I understand that correctly.
I'm a little bit out of my element, to be honest with you,
Okay.
but there are jurisdictions. So if you look at a territory map, you'll see this is APS's service area.
Right.
And this is TEP's service area. This is SRP's service area. And you'll have these little blank spots. And sometimes there are ranches out there. Sometimes what usually happens is they reach out to the nearest utility and, can you bring me some power?
Right.
And if they say no, at that point, you're forced to look into off-grid solutions.
Okay. All right.
Gotcha,
Well,
gotcha.
that answers
So
your question.
for basics,
Like you
yeah.
said,
Yeah. for
And
the-
if you want to know more, reach out to Tyler.
Absolutely.
if you're in the city, you're in the city. We can
Yeah.
make you independent, or you can make
Correct.
us independent as inexpensive as possible.
Yeah, most of what I deal with when people ask the question is I'm already sitting in their house in Chandler,
Right.
or something like that, and
Right.
there's nothing I can do for that particular person.
Yeah. Got it.
That answers that. So so now we've got how to maximize your solar for ROI. So
Mm-hmm.
you had talked to me earlier, and we had talked about how you would analyze what your house is using
Mm-hmm.
in essence, and then how to kind of formulate a way to make sure that those panels are maximized.
Absolutely.
So let's hear about that.
Well, so it depends. It differs from utility to utility because each utility has its own set of rules. We're in 23 different states. Some states have upwards of 5 utility companies
Wow.
in that state. We have 3 here. We have SRP, APS, and then TEP down in Tucson. Each one with its own set of rules. So you really need to know the territory that you're working in, and you kind of have to switch gears depending on whose house I'm going to.
Okay.
And the biggest difference would be SRP. APS and TEP are pretty standard as far as utility buyback rates and how you would design the system. In those scenarios, I'm typically designing a system upwards of about 105% to 120% of my customers' usage, depending on asking a series of questions about their future usage, how long they'll be in the home, how long is the AC unit, are they planning on getting electric vehicles, are they planning on putting in a pool, a series of questions where I'm taking notes and accounting for. And luckily, I've been in the industry long enough that I've had metrics from my customers specifically in those territories where I can see, okay, well, when I design a system at 100 to 103% of my customers' usage, their average post-solar utility bill is $3.86 a month. If their usage increases and that 103% becomes 98%, then their average post-solar utility bill could be $16.74 a month. And I take those metrics, constantly changing because the buyback rate is changing, and I have to readjust my numbers. And I just kind of make sure that I'm making sure that the customer is aware and understands what to expect from their solar system.
I think that's the biggest piece. Is
Absolutely.
People think, oh, well, I've got solar, so I never have to spend money on utilities.
It's very easy to say, yeah, this will totally take care of
Yeah.
your power. For me, 75% of my business is referral based, so I want my customers to like me in a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Right.
So it's a little bit more important that I make sure I'm taking care of them.
Right.
SRP is a completely different animal when you're talking about ROI, especially, just because of, without getting into too many numbers, the buyback rate is way lower. If you sell a kilowatt that you overproduce back to APS, they're going to pay you about 9.4 cents, I believe. If you'd sell a kilowatt to SRP, they're going to pay you 2.3 cents.
Wow.
So you could potentially put yourself in a situation where you're overproducing too much, you're throwing money down the toilet, and that's really going to hurt your ROI.
Right.
Now, I do have customers, like I have a buddy who lives in Tempe who says, I don't care about the ROI. I don't trust, what's happening in the world right now. I don't trust what's happening with gas prices. Utility prices are probably next, and I just want to get as independent as I possibly can. So as long as they know what to expect and they know that might potentially hurt their ROI, I'm totally comfortable doing it. I just got to make sure that they understand it.
Yeah,
Right.
managing their expectations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody comes in, walking into their door and go, oh, I can cover you completely. You'll never have to pay utilities again.
Happens all the time. That and the assumption that everyone can get and claim the federal tax credit and that they're going to get a check from the government is another misconception that really bugs me.
That's more of an accounting question.
It is, and I already said it once. I probably say it 3 times in a consultation. I am not a tax advisor.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of lunches with my CPA, so I can get a thorough understanding of everything. But you definitely need to consult your tax advisor.
Right.
This is your best case scenario.
Right.
This is your worst case scenario.
Right. For sure. Cool. All right. So let's talk about ways to finance, because there's ways to lease it and there's ways to finance it so you actually purchase it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, my company has decided to take a shift on that dirty word you just said, lease, because evidently it has some negative stigma. A lot of people compare it
It's
to
a 4-letter word when you say rent.
exactly. So it's gotten some negative press just because there was a huge rush in the solar industry probably 6 to 8 years ago when I first got in, and this is when a lot of smaller companies were getting in. Leases were wildly popular. Hey, you don't have to take out a loan. This is going to be your payments, and we're just going to design this system that's going to shoot all this power back to the utility company. You're going to make all this money off of it, all this stuff. But a lot of those people were getting taken advantage of, and the people who were designing the system didn't really understand what they were doing. So a lot of people got put into bad contracts, and then what ended up happening was a lot of people, because of the stipulations of that lease, they couldn't sell their home because the buyer wouldn't be approved for the lease. If you can't be approved for the lease, well, then you're going to move into a new home, but you're going to still be paying a lease on a different home that someone else owns.
Makes no sense.
Right. So we've fixed all those issues. We guarantee transfer of the system. By the way, we prefer to call it a PPA, a power purchase agreement. Because essentially that's what it is.
Okay.
But we guarantee the transfer of the system to the buyer no matter what their credit score is. We have a special division at our corporate headquarters called a service transfer specialist, and their job is entirely to help our customers that are putting their house on the market prepare to transfer that service and prepare all the options.
Nice.
So everything from very simple, we're just going to transfer this from the seller to the buyer, or this buyer loves the house and loves the idea of solar, but they'd really rather own the system. Well, we have options for that as well.
Okay.
But essentially, the idea behind the PPA is that you now have an option of who you buy your power from. In the past, when you buy a home, you don't have an option for who you buy your power from. You have an option on who you get your cable through. You have an option on your cell phone bill. No option on your utility company. So now you do. You can pay APS, who's charging you about 16 cents a kilowatt on average, and then on average they're raising their rates 5% a year. Or I can lock you in at 13 cents, and we'll never raise our rates on you. And so we'd come to an agreement on how much power you want to buy. If you're using 20,000 kilowatts right now, let's design a system at 21,000, 22,000, so you have some buffer for the future. And you're locked in. So in 25 years, when the rest of the valley is paying 35 cents a kilowatt, you're still locked in at 13. So that's the idea there. That way you're not going against your debt-to-income ratio. You're not taking out a loan. You're not worrying about tax incentives, which is huge for people like retirees who don't have any tax liability. If you don't have the tax liability, that's a huge benefit that you can't take advantage of.
Yeah.
So it's a good option to switch to the PPA option.
Okay.
So essentially, you become the power company.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why it bothers
Not you,
me
but
that. Sorry.
SunRun does, not you.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Not me personally. But that's why it kind of bothers me that it's so easy to get your solar license, because in a essence you are becoming a utility provider. You
Right.
should be. You should be thinking about it that way anyway.
Right.
Now, there's also the option that people want to own the system. They want to invest in their home. They don't want to rely on anyone else. And I totally understand that. I mean, that's what I ended up doing myself.
So on the transfer, like say I'm a buyer, she's a seller.
Mm-hmm.
She's got it locked in at 13 cents a kilowatt. Is that you can transfer it exactly at that? Does it change if I use more kilowatts than she did? Is it?
So, correct. The contract itself would be, let's say that she uses 15,000 kilowatts a year, and she's locked in for 15,000 kilowatts at 13 cents. Now, that original contract, we're guaranteeing the production of that system. So if the system underproduces what we say, we actually are contractually obligated to reimburse the difference. So we know you're going to get that 15,000 kilowatts.
Right.
Now, if you come in and you use 20,000 kilowatts, you're still going to have to buy 5,000 kilowatts from the utility company.
Okay.
So then at that point, it's up to you. If there's more real estate on the roof, you can reach back out to me and we can talk about adding more panels
Okay.
to cover up the difference. Regardless, even if the system is properly designed, if we make sure the panels are facing south or west, we're going to be eliminating a lot of your on-peak usage. Now, on-peak is the hours between 3 and 8 when it's more expensive. So if we can eliminate the majority of that, even if you have to buy 25, 10, 25, 35% of your power from the utility company, you're still going to be saving money because the majority of that power you buy from the utility company is going to be at off-peak rates.
Right. Okay.
Interesting. That's really
Interesting,
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about like if they wanted to do like a HELOC or things of that sort.
Yeah.
So cash out refis, all those different
Yeah.
ways that
Yeah,
they
I-
could actually purchase it.
Absolutely. So a lot of times people say, well, I have this whole Dave Ramsey mentality, and I hate the idea of going into debt, but I want to own the system. I don't want to have a PPA where the system isn't actually mine. In that scenario, I'll often pivot to how long. I ask a series of questions when I'm talking to someone, and if I know for a fact they have good credit, they have been in the home for 10 years, there's probably a lot of money available in that house. So a lot of times what I'll suggest is I'll ask them when the last time they did a refi was. It was wildly popular not too long ago when the rates were ridiculously
Crazy low.
Yeah. So what I would say is, have you ever considered a refi? Because what we can do is, if you want long-term financing at a low interest rate, I can get you long-term financing as low as 1.49% interest, which is fantastic. But if you really don't want a loan, if you want to pay for cash, we do have a cash discount. So you can spend less on the system. You can go and get a refi and pull some cash out of your home. Now, once again, I'm not a tax advisor,
Right.
but the way I understand it, the way it was explained to me, when you use the funds from a HELOC or a refi towards your home improvement, you get to deduct the entire cost.
Right.
So now you're kind of double dipping because you get to deduct the entire cost of the system, but you're still going to get your 26% federal tax credit
Right.
on the system. You're going to get a price break on the system because it's going to be a little bit less. And then once again, my favorite customers are the ones that don't have a payment. So they're sitting there with a
Right.
solar power with next to nothing, if not nothing, for
Right.
their utility bills.
Right.
Right. So those are pretty cool options. I
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are wrapping their head around how that works.
I am.
Because to me,
Can't you see the steam coming?
I can see that. I can totally see that. So it's really an interesting concept because to me, like, why wouldn't you want to lock in if you plan on staying in a house
Yeah.
for more than 10 years or 15 years, like that just makes sense to lock that in.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for me, I want to own my home. I want to get the thing paid off and be on easy street. I know I'm going to own my home for a really long time. But I've also had a realtor who bought a $20,000 system, sold her home 6 months after it was installed, showed the buyer the invoice. Like, I just invested $20,000 in my home, so I'm gonna raise the cost of my home. They said that sounds fair because we didn't have to go through the hassle of actually shopping for a solar company ourselves, and we're
Right.
going to roll it into our 30-year mortgage, so we're not going to have a payment. She didn't mention the fact that she's going to get $7,000 back from the federal and state
Right.
government later on,
Right.
and she just pockets that and walks away.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of little ins and outs
Yep.
that would be worth
Yeah.
having a conversation with Team Beery.
Exactly.
We could totally help you through
And your
all that.
accountant.
And your
Yes,
accountant.
definitely your accountant.
Yeah, definitely accountant. And how about a tax advisor?
Yes.
So that's some pretty cool stuff. So let's talk about, you had kind of mentioned APS and SRP. But I know, let's dig in that a little bit deeper because I don't think people understand that there is that much difference.
Oh, huge difference. And it always worries me when I go into an appointment with someone who's an SRP customer, which I'm an SRP customer, so I know firsthand.
So am I.
Yeah. So it's catch-22. You, as an SRP customer, you pay a little bit less than APS already.
Right.
But if you want to go solar, it gets very convoluted. And, I often have to slow things down. If I, for a second, see my customer's eyes start to glaze over, I got to take a step back and, hey, let's go over this again.
Right.
The SRP is basically trying something radically different than all other utility companies. And it kind of stemmed from, I think it was about 6 years ago, when SRP tried to enforce a fee on their solar customers with the intention of trying to push solar out of the market.
Yeah,
They-
and they were actually in a lawsuit over all
Correct,
that.
yeah. The lawsuit actually went all the way to Supreme Court
Right.
and was eventually settled out of court. So at that time, SunRun backed up and said, we're going to pull out of the territory. You guys spend all your money on lawyers. We'll go make money somewhere else. And when it finally got settled, SRP came with this new idea. Well, they said, okay, here are the things we hate about solar companies. But we know that they're not going away. So how can we work together to figure out a way that we can solve these issues and not lose our customers completely and coexist together? So the way they've done that is they encourage the installation of batteries, and they have new rate plans just specifically for solar customers, where you can pay from the 15 cents per kilowatt on average that you're paying now, as low as 3.6 cents a kilowatt.
Wow.
Now, remember, with that buyback rate of 2.3 cents, if you produce a kilowatt, you're really hurting your return on investment. So my job is to make sure that I eliminate all on-peak usage completely, lower your demand, which demand is another way that they calculate how much power you use at one specific time a day, and get you access to these new rate plans where you're paying next to nothing for the power that you do have to buy. So typically I'm designing a system anywhere from 50 to 60% of their power with a battery, and that way they get the added benefit of the battery in case the grid goes out. But the day-to-day function of the battery is to make sure that they never pay anything on peak and they never have any demand charges.
It's kind of like a variable speed
Kind
pool
of,
pump in a way.
kind of similar
It
idea.
kind of just
Yeah.
evens everything out.
Yeah,
in a
so
way.
I specifically look at the design of the home, and I've had people that I've had to tell, hey, honestly, your home is not good for solar. You would actually end up hurting yourself if you went solar, right? A real tough
That's
area.
why I
for
love
me.
you, because you are honest.
Well,
I love it.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
Yeah, I cringe a little bit whenever I go to Arcadia, because it's SRP, and they have these beautiful homes with these odd architectures and these huge trees, and most likely I'm not going to find a
Never
good
gonna
place.
get never
Unless you
get
build
that.
a shade out in the middle of nowhere.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
which that's a whole nother set of problems.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole idea is to make sure that not only that a monkey can design these systems. We have programs. You can plug in the customer's usage, or you can not plug in the customer's usage. and you can hit design, and the computer will spit out a design for you. Doesn't mean the computer understands the technicalities and the specifics of every single individual utility company. And not only that, the computer doesn't care about aesthetics. The computer doesn't care about your return on investment. It's just going to say, where can I put a panel to produce the most amount of power?
Does the computer factor in like the sun? Because you got to look at the sun's trajectory to catch the solar, right?
Absolutely. So our computer program is very advanced. So like I said, the south facing is always going to be your first choice. The computer wants to go east after that because technically an east-facing panel is going to produce more than a west-facing panel because it doesn't have the heat in the afternoon to bring down the production.
Right.
But the reality of the situation, if you know our utility company, is you want western-facing panels because that's when you're using all your power. When the sun's setting in the afternoon, that's when your AC is pumping away. That's when you're home for dinner. That's when power is more expensive from the utility company. So these things that you have to kind of take into consideration. Now, as far as
the batteries
annual
will
production,
change that a little bit, won't they?
So the batteries,
Like if you're catching it in the morning or not.
Yes, you're on the right track. So the day-to-day function of the battery is to charge itself between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. off of the solar panels. And then it's going to dump into the system as needed between the hours of 5 and 8 p.m. So if I can put panels on the south side of the home or the west side of the home, I know you're going to produce until that sun goes down. But the sun's going to go down before 8 p.m. On average, it's at 5:40 p.m. every day, on average during the year. So you're still going to get upwards of 2 hours, 2.5 hours of on-peak charges with no sun. Okay. That's where the battery will dump into the system as needed. So you'll go solar panels first, battery second, grid is the last resort, but only after 8 o'clock.
After, okay, gotcha.
So the difference between the two power companies is basically you have to design a different system per power company.
Completely.
But even in different states.
Oh yeah, so I don't even mess around with other states. I know a lot of guys that do, and a lot of guys that really know their craft and put a lot of time and effort into learning all the other utilities. You have to have a specific license to sell in California. Okay. I like my bubble. I like to stay. It's a pretty big bubble. I go all the way down to Tucson, all the way up to Prescott. Okay. You know, so I got more than enough people to keep me busy.
Right. That's awesome. Right. That's awesome. Well, wow. Like, you just kind of blew my mind with all this information. That's pretty cool. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We could keep going on this for hours and hours, but guess what? We're almost there. We got to finish this up. So thanks so very much for taking the time out to kind of get this all wrapped around. We've had so many people ask us questions, and we're like, we need an expert. So
I appreciate that.
So thank you so much for this. If you guys have some information and you want to know more about what SRP is about and what APS is about, we have resources on our Team Beery page that you guys can go to. You can check it all out. It's going to be pretty awesome. And then, of course, reach out to Tyler. He is the expert. So make sure that you reach out to him if you have questions. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this episode. And always use a very good team. All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.